Think the world's most boring bean is ordinary? It is actually a rare orchid imposter I'll reveal in this video. Pinto beans. These serve as the undisputed blue-collar workers of the modern pantry, showing up in a beautifully speckled, earth-toned uniform that completely vanishes the moment they clock in for a long shift in boiling water. Originating in the highlands of Peru, these unassuming little powerhouses eventually traveled north to become the absolute structural foundation of Mexican and southwestern cuisines. You might not realize it, but they are the unsung heroes, quietly holding your massive burrito together while the flashy guacamole takes all the social media credit. When cooked, they shed their painted aesthetic and melt into a miraculously creamy, rich texture that mashes with zero resistance, essentially becoming edible mortar. They do not demand fancy culinary degrees or expensive equipment to taste phenomenal. They just require a bit of patience, some salt, and a slow simmer. In a culture endlessly chasing the next trendy, overpriced superfood, the humble pinto stands as a gentle anchor. It shows us that sometimes, true reliability is not about being glamorous, but about showing up every single day, doing the heavy lifting, and keeping our most comforting meals from falling apart. Black beans. Think of them as the brooding, profoundly resilient Goths of the agricultural world, wearing a dark, impenetrable shell that hides an absolute treasure trove of nutritional wealth. Also known as turtle beans because of their hard, shiny exterior, they have been a dietary cornerstone in the Americas for roughly 7,000 years, practically watching ancient civilizations rise and fall. That midnight black coat is not just for dramatic aesthetic effect. It is completely loaded with anthocyanins, the exact same powerful antioxidants that give blueberries their celebrated superfood status. Yet, despite their elite nutritional profile, they possess a dense, almost meaty texture and an earthy flavor that grounds any dish they touch, from a slow-cooked Cuban soup to a vibrant Brazilian feijoada. They have this incredible capacity to swim in intensely bold spices like cumin, coriander, and crushed garlic, without ever losing their own distinct identity. They teach us a rather beautiful lesson about boundaries and integration, proving that you can fully immerse yourself in a vibrant, overwhelming environment, absorbing the best parts of it, while still fiercely maintaining the core of exactly who you are. Soybeans. Originally emerging from East Asia, these unassuming little green orbs are essentially the shape-shifting wizards of modern global agriculture, single-handedly balancing ecosystems and economies. Unlike almost every other plant-based food on the planet, they contain a complete protein profile, carrying every single essential amino acid a human body requires to survive and rebuild itself. While it is lovely to eat them whole and lightly salted out of their pods as edamame, their true world-dominating power comes from their astonishing capacity to completely alter their identity. Through thousands of years of ancient fermentation and modern processing, they morph into an incredibly diverse universe of foundational foods, effortlessly becoming spongy blocks of tofu, deeply complex miso pastes, pungent fermented natto, and the salty dark magic of soy sauce. They are the undisputed backbone of countless Asian cuisines and modern alternative diets, quietly acting as the invisible safety net for global food security. They represent the profound beauty of unseen potential, showing us that what we appear to be on the surface is just a fraction of what we can become when subjected to time, pressure, and a little bit of culture. Garbanzo beans. Widely known across the globe as chickpeas, these spherical, slightly bumpy overachievers have essentially carried human civilization on their shoulders since the dawn of agriculture. Cultivated in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East for roughly 10 millennia, they have witnessed the construction of the pyramids, the fall of Rome, and the invention of the electric blender. They are an absolute marvel of culinary engineering because of their impossible duality. On one hand, their structural integrity allows them to be roasted into a spectacularly crunchy, highly snackable state, yet on the other, they can be processed down into hummus, a paste so impossibly smooth and luxurious, it feels like eating velvet. Furthermore, the liquid they leave behind in a can miraculously whips up into meringue exactly like egg whites, making them an undisputed hero of the modern plant-based movement. They are the ultimate culinary shapeshifters, constantly reinventing themselves to fit whatever era or dietary trend humanity throws at them. Their journey showcases that adaptability is the ultimate survival skill, proving that remaining flexible and open to transformation is the truest way to secure a legacy that lasts for 10,000 years. Kidney beans. Stepping into the slightly dangerous, high-stakes territory of the pantry, these are named with striking literalism because they look exactly like miniature human organs. Native to Central America, they boast a remarkably thick skin that allows them to endure violent, rolling boils and hours of aggressive simmering in heavily spiced chilies without ever losing their firm, satisfying bite. However, they harbor a dark secret. Eating them raw or undercooked is a remarkably bad idea, as they contain high concentrations of a naturally occurring toxin that will cause absolute chaos in your digestive system. They demand a deep level of respect. You must soak them, boil them fiercely, and treat them with care before they safely yield their slightly sweet flavor and robust texture to classic dishes like Louisiana red beans and rice. There is a profound metaphorical weight to their existence, acting as proof that the things in life that offer the most substantial reward often require careful handling, patience, and a healthy dose of respect for their wild nature. Once you put in the necessary work to tame them, they become one of the most fiercely loyal, deeply satisfying ingredients in your entire kitchen arsenal. Navy beans. Small, white, and deceptively ordinary, these little guys essentially fueled the maritime expansion of the United States without asking for a single drop of glory. In the middle of the 19th century, the United States Navy realized they needed a food source that could survive the brutal, damp conditions of a warship for months on end without spoiling, and this incredibly sturdy legume answered the call. They became such a mandatory, life-saving part of the standard sailor's daily ration that they permanently lost their original botanical names to history and simply took on the title of the military branch they served. From a culinary perspective, they are a blank canvas with remarkable structural integrity. Designed to sit in a pot of molasses, mustard, and salted pork for hours to create iconic Boston baked beans. They absorb the chaotic, intensely rich flavors surrounding them, like a sponge, yet they stubbornly refuse to disintegrate into mush, acting as silent anchors in hearty stews. Their legacy is a testament to the idea that you do not need to be the biggest or the flashiest to leave a massive footprint on human history. Sheer durability and the willingness to support others is often enough to make you immortal. Black-eyed peas. Instantly recognizable by the distinct, dark smudge that stares back at you from their pale, creamy center. These are not actually peas at all, but rather a species of cowpea with a deeply emotional historical footprint. Originally domesticated in West Africa, they survived the horrific transatlantic slave trade to become deeply rooted in the agricultural and culinary soul of the American South. They are famous for being fiercely drought-resistant, happily growing in terrible, nutrient-depleted soil that would easily kill a weaker plant. Because of this phenomenal resilience, they became a symbol of survival and eventual prosperity, which is why eating them on New Year's Day alongside collard greens is a widely practiced superstition meant to guarantee good luck and financial wealth for the coming year. When simmered with a smoked ham hock, they break down into a rich, earthy, deeply comforting gravy that tastes like home and history combined. They carry the profound weight of human endurance in their tiny frames, teaching us that true luck is rarely about random chance. It is usually born from the sheer, stubborn refusal to die when planted in harsh conditions, turning survival itself into an art form. Lima beans. These flat, pale green, moon-shaped legumes are arguably the most tragically misunderstood and unfairly maligned characters in the entire history of dinner. Named after the capital city of Peru, where they have been respected and cultivated for thousands of years, they somehow boarded ships, traveled north, and became the ultimate childhood villain, mostly because an entire generation of parents insisted on boiling them into a chalky, joyless paste. It is an absolute culinary injustice. When treated with even a fraction of dignity and cooked properly, they yield a smooth, incredibly lush consistency that actually earned them the much more appetizing nickname of butter beans in the American South. They thrive in sweltering climates and have historically been paired with corn to create succotash, a brilliant Native American dish where the amino acids of the bean and the grain combine to form a complete, life-sustaining protein. Their story is one of terrible public relations and ruined first impressions, illustrating that sometimes, when we entirely despise something, it is not actually their fault. We simply haven't been introduced to them in an environment where they were allowed to shine. Cannellini beans. If legumes had a socio-economic hierarchy, these pale, silky, elongated beauties would absolutely be summering on the Amalfi Coast wearing tailored linen. Often referred to as white kidney beans, they are the sophisticated, treasured darlings of central and southern Italian cooking. While they share the robust physical architecture of their red cousins, their interior is dramatically different, hiding a noticeably fluffy, cloud-like texture that melts with an almost buttery grace the moment it hits your tongue. They possess a very mild, nutty flavor profile that does not shout for attention, which makes them the perfect canvas for the simplest, most respectful preparations. Toss them with a heavy pour of high-quality, peppery olive oil, a sprig of fresh sage, and a crushed clove of garlic, and they transform from a humble crop into an elevated dining experience. They do not need heavy sauces or complex processing to shine. Their magic lies in their quiet reserve. Their quiet elegance proves that true sophistication is rarely about complexity or being overwhelmed by a million competing elements, but rather about possessing an inherent quality that requires only the bare minimum of embellishment to be recognized as spectacular. Mung beans. Tiny, intensely green, and incredibly eager to grow, these little spheres are essentially the caffeinated overachievers of the sprout world. Native to the Indian subcontinent, they are the secret engine behind those massive, crunchy white bean sprouts you find piled high in your pho or stir-fried into your pad thai. Unlike other beans that demand hours of boiling and heavy seasoning to be palatable, the mung bean just needs a wet paper towel and a couple of days in the dark to literally explode with life, sprouting into a crisp, hydrating vegetable. When they aren't busy sprouting, they are stripped of their green jackets and boiled down into sweet, soothing dessert soups across Asia, or mashed into savory, golden pancakes on the streets of Seoul. They carry a light, slightly sweet, and fiercely clean flavor profile that feels deeply refreshing no matter how they are prepared. Their entire existence is a masterclass in latent energy and reinvention. It shows that no matter how small, dormant, or insignificant you might feel sitting in the dark, all it takes is a tiny drop of water and the right environment to split your shell wide open, reinvent yourself, and reach eagerly toward the light. Fava beans. Broad, flat, and remarkably ancient, these regal legumes carry a heavy air of historical aristocracy mixed with a lingering hint of pop culture menace. They were the absolute cornerstone of the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern diet, long before the chickpea ever learned to make hummus, feeding pharaohs, Roman gladiators, and ancient Greek philosophers. However, eating them requires an almost meditative level of dedication, as they are encased in a massive, fuzzy pod, and then further wrapped in an individual, waxy skin that must be blanched and painfully peeled away by hand, just to reach the bright green, buttery treasure inside. It is incredibly tedious work. Of course, modern audiences primarily know them as the side dish, an infamous cinematic serial killer paired with a nice Chianti, which unfairly cemented their reputation as a creepy culinary flex. But in reality, their delicate, earthy, and slightly sweet flavor is a fleeting, seasonal reward that celebrates the arrival of spring. The immense labor required to access their brilliance forces you to slow down and appreciate your food, proving that the most exquisite things in life are rarely served to us on a silver platter. They demand our effort, our patience, and our absolute presence. Cranberry beans. Also known as borlotti beans, these absolute showstoppers strut onto the agricultural stage wearing a breathtaking, vibrant coat of creamy white heavily streaked with bright magenta, looking like little edible modern art paintings. They are arguably the most visually stunning legumes you can buy at a farmer's market, naturally drawing the eye and promising a spectacular visual feast. However, they come with a hilariously tragic plot twist. The absolute second you expose them to boiling water, all of those magnificent pink streaks dissolve into the abyss, leaving behind a completely uniform, drab, brownish-tan bean. It feels like a culinary magic trick gone horribly wrong. Thankfully, what they lose in visual flair, they immediately make up for with a thick, velvety texture and a remarkably rich, chestnut-like flavor that elevates any minestrone or pasta dish they touch. They are the ultimate lesson in managing expectations and looking past the surface. We learn that physical beauty is incredibly fleeting, literally washing away in the hot water of life's daily struggles. But the internal substance, the richness of character, and the warmth you bring to the table is what actually sustains the world. Adzuki beans. Small, vibrant red, and defiantly sweet, These little rebels completely shatter the Western world's preconceived notion that beans belong strictly in the savory department. Originating in East Asia, they have spent centuries being boiled down with immense amounts of sugar to create an incredibly smooth, deeply rich red bean paste that serves as the beating heart of traditional Japanese, Chinese, and Korean desserts. Instead of sitting next to a piece of heavily salted pork in a murky stew, they are elegantly stuffed into delicate mochi, baked into fluffy sweet breads, and layered under massive mountains of shaved ice. They possess a naturally nutty, sweet flavor that lends itself perfectly to becoming a confection, proving that biology is not always destiny. While the rest of their legume family is busy absorbing garlic and chili flakes, the adzuki bean decided to embrace the sweeter side of life. This makes them a beautiful metaphor for breaking free from the expectations placed upon you by your background. Just because everyone else around you is marching to the beat of a savory drum does not mean you cannot carve out your own unique destiny and bring joy to people in a completely unexpected way. Vanilla beans. Much like our caffeinated friend, this is another wildly successful imposter, masquerading as a bean while actually being the long, shriveled seed pod of a highly temperamental Mexican orchid. The process of cultivating them is an absolute nightmare of agricultural anxiety, as the flowers bloom for exactly 1 day a year and must be painstakingly pollinated by hand before the pod can grow, dry, and cure over several months. Inside that wrinkled, dark, leathery exterior lies thousands of microscopic black specks that contain an impossibly complex, deeply floral, and intoxicatingly aromatic flavor compound. Yet, in one of the most tragic ironies of human language, we somehow took this incredibly exotic, difficult to produce, and wonderfully complex ingredient and turned its name into a synonym for something that is boring, plain, or uninspired. It is an outrageous insult to an ingredient that fundamentally elevates every cake, cookie, and scoop of ice cream it touches. The vanilla bean stands as a quiet testament to the tragedy of being underappreciated. It highlights how you can be profoundly complex, wildly valuable, and deeply foundational to the happiness of others, and people will still completely take your magic for granted. Cocoa beans. Rounding out the trinity of famous imposters, these large, almond-shaped seeds are pulled from the bizarre, football-sized pods of the cacao tree, which grows stubbornly, directly out of the trunk rather than on the branches. Native to the deep Amazon rainforest, they were so fiercely valued by ancient Mesoamerican civilizations that they were literally used as a form of currency, meaning you could walk into a market and buy your groceries with a handful of these bitter little seeds. In their raw form, they are incredibly astringent and virtually unrecognizable to the modern palate. But through a magical alchemy of fermentation, roasting, and grinding, they transform into chocolate, the ultimate universal language of comfort, romance, and apology. They are responsible for more human happiness, elevated serotonin levels, and resolved relationship arguments than practically any other substance on Earth. They reveal a deeply comforting reality about life and human nature. The raw materials of our existence might start out bitter, strange, and hard to digest, but with a little bit of time, the right kind of friction, and a touch of sweetness, we have the immense capacity to transform into something that brings absolute joy to everyone we meet.